Rocky coastlines. It forms where hard, resistant rock meets the sea, and the result is one of the most dramatic landscapes on Earth. Waves crash against cliffs, carve out caves, and slowly chip away at the land over thousands of years. You find these coastlines along the edges of ancient geological shields, places like the west coast of Ireland, the Norwegian fjords, and the rugged shores of Newfoundland. What makes rocky coastlines distinct is the sheer endurance of the rock itself. The sea never stops working, but the land pushes back. Over time, arches form, sea stacks rise from the water like isolated towers, and headlands jut out into the ocean, while bays curve in behind them. These features are not just beautiful, they tell the story of how long a particular stretch of coast has been under pressure from the sea.
Sandy coastlines. This is probably the version of coast most people picture when they close their eyes and imagine the ocean. Long, flat stretches of sand, gentle waves, and a horizon that seems to go on forever. Sandy coastlines are not as simple as they look, though. The sand itself is constantly moving, carried by waves, shifted by tides, and pushed along the shore by currents in a process called longshore drift. Sand does not stay still, which means sandy coastlines are always changing shape, sometimes dramatically within a single storm season. The sand that makes up a beach can come from eroded rock, from rivers carrying sediment to the sea, or even from the shells and skeletons of marine organisms. Some of the most famous sandy beaches in the world, along Florida, the coast of Portugal, and the Australian shoreline, owe their existence to millions of years of accumulated material.
Mudflat coastlines. These coastlines tend to be overlooked, and that is a mistake. Where rivers meet the sea, and where sheltered bays protect the water from strong wave action, fine sediment settles and builds up into vast, flat expanses of mud. At low tide, mudflats are exposed, wide, dark, and quiet. They look empty, but they are among the most productive ecosystems on the planet. Wading birds pick through the surface, feeding on worms and small invertebrates. Beneath the mud, a dense network of organisms filters the water and recycles nutrients. The Thames estuary, the Yellow Sea in East Asia, and the Wadden Sea in Northern Europe all feature extensive mudflats that support enormous populations of migratory birds and juvenile fish. Without mudflats, many of the fish we eat would not survive their early lives. Estuarine coastline. An estuary forms where a river flows into the ocean and freshwater and saltwater mix together. The coastline that surrounds this transition zone has its own character. It is neither fully freshwater nor fully marine. It sits in between, and the plants and animals that live there have adapted to handle the constant change in salinity. The water in an estuary rises and falls with the tide, and with each cycle, it brings in nutrients from the sea and carries sediment and organic material from inland. Some of the world's great estuaries, the Amazon, the Chesapeake Bay, the Ganges-Brahmaputra Delta, are so large they shape the climate and ecology of entire regions. Human settlements have clustered around estuaries for thousands of years, drawn by the access to fresh water, fish, and navigable channels leading inland.
Mangrove coastline. Found in tropical and subtropical regions, this is one of the most unusual and resilient coastline types in the world. Mangrove trees grow directly in saltwater, their tangled root systems rising above the mud in dense, interlocking networks. These roots trap sediment, slow the movement of water, and create sheltered nurseries for hundreds of species of fish, crustaceans, and birds. Mangrove coastlines act as natural barriers against storms. They absorb wave energy and reduce the impact of storm surges on the land behind them. Countries across Southeast Asia, West Africa, and the Caribbean rely on mangrove forests to protect coastal communities. The loss of mangroves through clearing for shrimp farms and coastal development has left many of these communities significantly more vulnerable to flooding and erosion.
Delta coastline. When a river carries more sediment to the sea than waves and tides can carry away, The material builds up and extends the land outward into the ocean, forming a delta. The shape of a delta depends on the balance between river flow, wave energy, and tidal strength. The Nile Delta stretches out in a wide fan shape into the Mediterranean. The Mississippi Delta has a more finger-like form, its channels splitting and branching into the Gulf of Mexico. The Ganges-Brahmaputra Delta in Bangladesh and India is the largest in the world and home to tens of millions of people. Deltas are fertile and flat, which makes them attractive for farming and settlement, but they are also among the most flood-prone places on Earth. Many major deltas are currently sinking because river management upstream has reduced the flow of new sediment.
Fjord coastlines. Fjords are long, narrow inlets of the sea that cut deep into mountainous terrain, formed by glaciers that carved through valleys during ice ages and then retreated as the climate warmed. The sea filled in behind them. The walls of a fjord can rise almost vertically from the water, and the depth can be extraordinary. Norway's Sognefjord reaches over 1,000 meters deep in places, far deeper than the open sea just outside its entrance. Fjord coastlines are found in Norway, Iceland, Greenland, southern Chile, New Zealand's South Island, and Canada's British Columbia. They are spectacular environments with cool, calm waters sheltered from ocean swells. Salmon farming, tourism, and fishing have all developed around fjord coastlines, drawn by the protected waters and the sheer scale of the scenery. Coral reef coastline. In warm, clear, shallow tropical waters, coral reefs grow along coastlines and create some of the most biologically rich environments anywhere on Earth. A reef is built by living organisms, tiny coral polyps that secrete calcium carbonate skeletons and accumulate over centuries into complex branching structures. The reef itself acts as a coastline in the sense that it controls how waves reach the shore, absorbing energy and protecting the beaches and communities behind it. The Great Barrier Reef in Australia is the largest coral reef system in the world and visible from space. The coastlines of the Caribbean, the Red Sea, and the Indo-Pacific are all shaped in part by the presence of reef systems. Coral reefs are under serious pressure from warming ocean temperatures, which cause bleaching events, and from ocean acidification driven by rising carbon dioxide levels. Sea cliff coastline. Distinct from general rocky coastlines, sea cliffs form where the edge of a plateau, a highland, or a raised landmass meets the sea and the base is actively eroded by waves. The cliffs of Moher in Ireland, the White Cliffs of Dover in England, the cliffs of Étretat in France. These are places where rock layers that were once far inland now stand exposed at the edge of the ocean. The height and steepness of a cliff depends on the type of rock and how quickly it erodes. Soft chalk erodes relatively quickly, while granite resists for much longer. At the base of sea cliffs, wave-cut platforms form, wide, flat shelves of rock that are exposed at low tide and represent the slow retreat of the cliff face over geological time. These platforms are often rich in marine life and record thousands of years of coastal change in their layered rock. Barrier Island coastline. A barrier island is a long, narrow strip of sand that sits parallel to the mainland, separated from it by a lagoon or a shallow bay. These islands absorb the energy of the open ocean and shelter the coast behind them. The barrier islands of the eastern United States, stretching from New England all the way to Texas, protect hundreds of miles of mainland coast. How barrier islands form is still a subject of scientific discussion, but they are almost certainly a product of rising sea levels after the last ice age, combined with the movement of sand by waves and wind. They are dynamic and mobile. They can shift position over decades. Building cities and holiday resorts on barrier islands has been a persistent habit in many parts of the world, and it has frequently come into conflict with the island's natural tendency to move.